I'd like to welcome everyone to the Technologically Hip podcast with our nerdy hosts, Nate, Patrick, and me, Edward. Today's topic is all about that nasty scourge of ransomware that's been all over the news. Make sure you stay tuned until the end to find out how you can get free cybersecurity training. Plus, each month, we are giving away personalized cyber risk index that will help you find and prioritize gaps in your business. To start off with, let's talk about some immediate steps if your business has just been hit by ransomware.
Got to get your computers offline from the internet and from each other. If you've had two compromised computers and you think you can just run the other eight, that's a mistake. You are going to be infected further. I got to get them disconnected. Got to get them to stop talking to each other.
Also, you want to not restore anything. Don't do anything. First thing you should do if you have cybersecurity or cyber insurance, you should give them a call.
They're going to assign an incident response team, likely, and they're going to give you some direction, right, on which ways to go. The reason you don't want to restore files right away because you don't want to hide any of the evidence or overwrite any of the evidence that the insurer is going to look for with their incident response team. And you're probably going to want to call your local police department. Ransomware is like any other crime.
It's criminal. Yeah, it's criminal. It is. It's like your store was broken into, your doors kicked in, and they stole something. They did steal something. It just happens to be in the form of bits on a computer. But it is your data. It is your property that they're stealing from you.
Not to mention that in your industry, it might be a crime to not report it. So in Canada, companies that are subject to the Personal Information Protection and Electronic Documents Act, PETA, as it's known as, must report to the Privacy Commissioner of Canada, amongst other rules, else there might be fines. So you must do that. But also, most companies have some sort of personal information on their systems that they're holding. So it's most likely if you get breached, you probably will have to call the Privacy Commissioner.
Your cyber insurance will probably ask you if you've contacted law enforcement as well.
Now that we know what to do if you've had a breach, let's talk about what is ransomware and why are small businesses particularly vulnerable. So let's define it. What is ransomware, fellas?
All right, ransomware it's pretty simple. It's data for money, basically. So what they'll use different methods. The hackers, once they get in, they will either encrypt your data or steal it, and they'll ask for a ransom to get it back or decrypt it.
I've heard of them doing both, right? They'll encrypt it and then also steal it.
That's right.
They'll demand a ransom. So they're trying to extort you.
I was going to say that they usually too, that obviously the other difficulty is that sometimes most of the time they'll ask you to pay in some kind of like cryptocurrency, Bitcoin. So it's not only terrifying, you could lose your data. It's a real inconvenience. You got to go figure out how to buy Bitcoin or cryptocurrency and then pay them that method. And the reason they do that is because they want to make sure that it's untraceable. They don't want anyone know about the transaction.
Right.
Yeah, they don't give you a mailing address, unfortunately, to send the check to.
Do you remember years ago when the news stories were coming out with grandmothers getting hit with this new type of virus that was locking them out of pictures of their grandkids? But that's changed. It's a real business now. And they've moved into attacking businesses because businesses have more money.
That's right.
Now, the question is, why do they do it?
You already answered it.
Answered that. It's money. Money.
That's
right?
right.
Lots of money to be made. So much money to be made. When you're stealing the core of a business, they're gonna pay you to get it back.
Exactly. Imagine you're a medical clinic and all your patients' data is encrypted. What is that worth to you to get back?
Yeah, might be worth your entire business. You might never operate again.
Mm-hmm. And it's easy money because they're not having to go to your office and kick in a door to steal your cash tray or server.
Or your server.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's safer than the traditional break-ins. And the extra benefit is these hackers are often in different countries. So they're doing it from areas that are safe from law enforcement. Maybe there's governments that don't really crack down on this. And so they're sitting behind computers thousands of miles or kilometers away, and they're getting in and they're attacking.
Yeah, it's not just the individuals anymore, right? It's not the script kiddies. It's not the dude sitting at home making his own malware. It's becoming a business in itself. So we're seeing, let's call them businesses. We've done training where we've seen examples on the dark web where you have a group And you can hire the group to go attack someone, to exfiltrate their data, or to infect them with ransomware. And it's a cash transaction. Like, it's crazy. And it goes bigger than that. We're seeing nation state attacks. We've been told we're at risk here of attackers from North Korea, China, Russia, especially with the war between Russia and Ukraine. We received a warning from the Canadian government or the American government that these attacks are going to increase as a way to destabilize our country. So it's way bigger than your little hacker. It's state funded. Yeah,
that's gone.
Yeah, it's real.
There are individuals doing it, of course. It's
Just
not as prevalent.
Yeah.
These people are often joining larger groups like these crime syndicates. We've had offices call us, such as you guys will remember, the dental office in Fort Erie that basically has no historical records of patients. They have no schedules and no contact information for anyone. And they have no ability to bill the insurers because they got hit with ransomware several years ago.
Yeah, that was a crazy story because the hackers got in through an email, which is very common. They got credentials. They got in, they were using the server as someone's desktop. So that person, they let them in through an email. They encrypted it all. And I remember that they called us and we had got some files back for them because they had a partial backup. And then we advised them to do this and all the things that you should do to protect yourself, but they didn't really take action on it. They hummed and hawed a bit. And because of that, the hackers got in again. And the second time they got in, because the password to the email was the same as their cloud backup, they got in there and they encrypted the entire cloud backup. So that's how they ended up having no records left. So it was just a bit of, you can't delay. You've got to take action.
That's incredible.
It's insane.
Yeah. And you remember that manufacturing plant in Niagara Falls. And once they get hit, they couldn't reference orders or bills of sale, materials deliveries. So they couldn't pay suppliers or run any of their machines. So their staff were idle. It's really awful because there's a significant financial and operational setback due to ransomware. Some of the things that companies can't do is they can't service their customers. They can't get paid because they can't generate invoices. They're not doing work. Their AP and AR, their accounts payable, accounts receivable are stalled. Their company and their historical records of company and staff and clients are inaccessible, right? Not to mention the personal information about their staff, their financials, their client information, their intellectual property. Basically anything the business generates will be attacked and could be extorted. Not to mention the liability the company may face for not securing their data properly.
And that's what makes the ransom look appealing, right? You give me 10,000 arbitrary number now, and you can keep working for the next week and make your $100,000 instead of zero.
And possibly avoid any lawsuits if you get the data back. There's definitely a want to pay. And who are you paying? You're paying someone that you shouldn't be trusting. They just encrypted all your data, and now you're going to give them money and trust that they're going to act accordingly.
That's a scary thought. So let's review some of the most frequent ways small businesses become victims of ransomware attacks.
Like we said with the Fort Erie Dental Office, they were compromised through email. And that is by far the most attacked surface across any organization. Anyone can go knocking and say, hey, I'm your boss. Here's this file. I need you to run it ASAP, right? Whether it's an executable or getting you to do something for them, that's the way it's going to come in 90% of the time.
Yeah. Phishing emails are probably the most common way. Absolutely. It comes through an email, it looks legit, and you don't question it, but you need to.
So over 90% of that is coming through email. What are some of the other ways?
Well, a big thing that's happening is, and it's always happened, this is actually goes back way back, is your operating systems and they have updates, security updates, critical updates, and if you're not doing them, you're vulnerable. So they'll find the hackers will find a way, a hole in the software, a hole in the operating system that they can get in, and Microsoft will release its patch. But if you don't do that patch, it becomes a large attack surface, becomes a great way for them to get into to all your systems.
Yep, and we saw that on the global scale with the WannaCry ransomware attack, 2017. It was, the vulnerability was with SMB server message block on unpatched systems, specifically XP and Windows 7. So there was organizations running massive amounts of unpatched machines that were no longer in a service cycle. Their support ended in 2010, and they ran them because they didn't find the funds or the reason to replace them, and their systems were crippled. It was worldwide. It crushed the UK health system, and it left people in hospitals vulnerable to the worst case scenario, death. Right, like that was the ultimate attack, and that's one people will probably the most. I don't like using the term popular, but that's the term. That's the one that everyone knows of,
Like the most
because of how,
significant.
yeah,
It
for global impact.
yeah, it was. I would also add it was like a watershed moment for companies to take a look
Yeah.
inside and start to wonder, are we safe?
Yeah, absolutely. And as an MSP, they were also looking at themselves saying, are our clients safe? Are we doing everything we can to keep them safe? It was a huge moment.
But we can't forget another way, which is those weak and reused passwords that people have.
You got to change your passwords, and they've got to be sophisticated, and they can't all be the same. They're using personal information, searching social media, and they're finding things about you. And if you're using a password that's your two kids' names and the date of their birth, they're gonna be able to smash their way in.
Yeah, like a dictionary attack. That's a little different, but if they know anything about you, of course, they'll use that against you. But dictionary attacks are slightly different, which is when they try millions of password combinations within minutes. And if you have weak passwords, a dictionary attack does not take very long to hack or crack it. People don't often consider that other sites that they've subscribed to can get hacked as well. And their personal information and their usernames and passwords, and by personal information, it might be where they live or a credit card number. All that information can be harvested from another site without your knowledge. And they know so much more about you now, and possibly even the password you used on those sites, and use that to get into everything else that you have. The question now is, fellers, how can a small business owner assess their current IT setup to identify these vulnerabilities?
A security risk assessment is going to be your first step. You need to identify the vulnerability somehow. You can't just guess. You can hire an IT firm such as us to execute that for you. They'll review your entire setup, from your network to your user training to your email security, your physical security, and they'll be able to provide you with a pretty comprehensive report on what they found and remediations for that. Whether it's a service or a product or whatever it may be, they can show you what you need to do to get that standing up to a baseline level.
So they're going to help you. They're going to help you identify some of your weak links that you don't even think are weak. Email addresses can be weak. Your website exposure, IP addresses that your company uses on the internet, for instance, right? These are some of the weaknesses that most people don't think of on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, I think about it like you don't know what's wrong with your plumbing until you call a plumber, or a car until you bring it to your mechanic, right? It's the same thing with your IT. You don't know any better. Why would you? You're the business owner. You're trying to operate and make money. You got to bring in a pro to tell you what you need, to advise on what you need.
I think it's actually even worse than those examples, because there's nothing really that will tell you something. There's no knocking at the engine. There's no warning. Everything just works. It's working, but you don't know underlying what issues you may have
until you have them.
Do you have them?
Of course, I never thought of that. And for industries that require compliance, this will help them show their level of compliance in the different areas required.
Yeah, absolutely. Like healthcare, law, they all have standards, compliance standards that they're supposed to be meeting, and they need to know how to get there.
Let's talk about some stories where lack of security led to some ransomware attacks.
One of them I could think of is Niagara Falls, that therapist that had the open RDP port. They were just remoting into their machine from home. There's no real security. There's no VPN in the middle. They just have an open port. So obviously a hacker can just get in there, start hammering that password, and then have access to their machine at the office, right, which gives them access to everything on the network.
And there was no engine knocking. So
that's right. Nothing's happening. Nothing's warning you.
Yeah. And they're just in the background trying passwords over passwords for passwords, thousands a minute. And you have no idea they're even trying. Oh, and the contractor in St. Catharines that had those old unpatched Windows computers, That's another big way. Of course, if you have unpatched systems and you open a bad link or open a file, then they're going to just run Ramshaw through your organization. They're going to have full access in no time. So now the question is, what can our listeners do for ransomware protection? What are the must-have security measures?
I think, or well, I don't think, we know it starts with the human, right? The human is the one who has the authentication to get you where you need to go from the hacker's perspective. So they're going to start with that. They're going to phish you. They're going to pretend to be someone. They're going to try to manipulate you into giving them what they want. So security awareness training is, we believe, the biggest factor in security. If you can secure the human portion of it at the top layer, then all your layers below are going to get tested far less than they would if people are just clicking on every phishing, typing in all their credentials, typing in passwords. That's number one for us.
And they're actually often they're well drafted and they're well hidden. So awareness training is critical. You got to be able to spot the fakes. Yeah,
exactly. They need to be able to see what is, and then after that, you need to, if they happen to get through, you need some kind of, or sorry, not happen to get through. What I was thinking actually more was the training is the most important, but if you can also have email filters before it hits their inbox. Let's say the average person gets multiple phishing attacks per week, probably more than that. If you have a filter that can block it, so you won't see that in the inbox. So if you think the weakest point is the human and they're trained, you still never know. If you have something that can stop those emails from coming into their inbox, they're not going to be able to click them.
Yeah, it's like reducing your human attack surface, right?
Yep.
So if the human's good at catching 99% of them, that means they have an opportunity to accidentally be subject to ransomware with that 1%.
That's right.
But if you add email filtering on top, and that can if that can stop 99%, then it's much more unlikely that you've got 1% that gets through, and then 1% of what the person ends up seeing is a much smaller chance of having a ransomware.
That's why we layer it.
Yeah, it's got a layer, which is also why you got to have your basic antivirus or endpoint protections.
Just to pick up the scraps.
That's another layer. Yeah.
Yeah. You don't want that. You don't want that to be tested daily. You don't want those things telling you that they've killed several attempts a day, but that's your last resort there, is if the access is given to try to stop them there. But then on top of that, let's say after that, everything gets through, your layers are compromised. You need a good backup, a frequent, reliable backup. It needs to be in multiple areas, needs to be on site, needs to be off site, it needs to be encrypted, it needs to be secured. You need MFA to even pretend to access it. You need a vendor that you trust, and you have to test them, because if all goes wrong and you can't go to your client and say, I can get you everything back as it was, you just lost. The client's done, you're done. Reliable backup to get them back in that disaster recovery scenario is critical.
And just to go back to passwords, and you got to make sure that your backups are covered by a secure password and that they have MFA, so that a hacker can't get into where you're storing your backups.
Let's get into MFA. It's hopefully you've heard of this as the listener. It means multi-factor authentication. There's another term for it called 2FA, the number 2, and it is also known as two-factor authentication. And that's when you're prompted with an text message code, or an email with a code in it, or you have to type in some numbers that generate on your phone, for instance. Yeah. Those are the extra factors. I'm sure you've heard about it. If not, you should really contact us. But realistically, you need to use MFA or 2FA in everything online, everywhere in your business and your personal life.
That's right.
That's a standard.
Without exception.
Without exception. We promote that everywhere we go. Just imagine if you're a hacker and I've guessed your username and your password, I can get into anything online of yours. But if there's a third factor, if there's another thing that I need to provide in order to get in, I'm going to be stopped because I don't have that text message or that extra email with the code in it, or even the codes that rotate on your phone. So That's going to stop 99% of attacks. So if you can, if you can do that, you're saving yourself a lot of headache.
Yeah, you have to do it, and you're being forced to do it already. I remember even 3 years ago telling people about MFA is like, oh no, I've never heard of that. I don't want to do it. Now, when I introduce it to someone, or I say, hey, set up your email account, here's your MFA, they're like, oh yeah, I have that for my 3 banks, my Amazon account, and I have it all. So now that is becoming more adopted, it's good because now people are getting to that level of security. Unfortunately, that means eventually we'll have to go to the next layer once MFA is solved, if MFA is ever solved. But you need it. You need it now. You need it everywhere. You need to tell your friends and your parents, everything. Everyone needs it.
It's so true. I think just if I think back a while, like you said, a little while ago, a few years ago, it used to be a story to convince them, hey, you really should have this, and now it's become a must. It's not a maybe, and I think if you can do anything for anyone that you're servicing, any company or a friend or family member, the best thing you can do is it's non-negotiable. It has to be done, and to get that message across to who you're helping is key.
Agreed.
Yeah, I also agree. Let's discuss the role of a managed service provider like CSN Tech Center ourselves, our role in ransomware protection.
It's like we said before, we're going to start with your security baseline or your security risk assessment. We're going to find out your attack surfaces. We're going to educate you on these attack surfaces and how you can be manipulated and how people are trying to get to you. And we're going to build you a baseline and give you recommendations on where to go from there.
So we're going to provide all those tools to add layers to your security. Think of it as a whole bunch of different doors to go through. We're going to add a bunch of doors, make it harder and harder. Each door's got a different type of lock, and it's going to make it harder for anyone to get through all those doors without the right access.
Right. So we're providing those tools that give you the layered protection. We're also providing a regular training to your employees, to the staff, because those tactics and tools change often, right? But the hackers are not doing the same things today that they were 6 months ago or 6 years ago. They're adjusting.
They're evolving. They have to.
Yes,
they have. If they're going to make money, they need to change their plan because we're getting wise to this plan. They need a new plan.
Managed service providers are going to make sure you have backups that are occurring and finishing without errors. They're going to help you devise a recovery and continuity plan. And they're going to allow you, the business owner, to focus on your business.
Yeah, they shouldn't be worrying about their IT or the security. They should be worrying about running their business.
Right, I agree.
And actually, the one thing I wanted to touch on there quickly was about how it's evolving. Things are changing day to day, month to month, year to year. And that's going to be part of our commitment, is to not just sell you a package, set it all up, see the green check marks and run away. We're constantly learning and training on what these threats are and how to defend against them. So your plan or whatever is included may evolve over time. And that includes things like MFA and other methods that, as we learn about them, we'll roll them out, right? It's not just a fire and forget with us, especially.
Agreed.
That's right.
Let's review, or let's discuss how employee training is crucial in protecting your business from ransomware, but also what are some of the effective methods that the people that are listening?
When it comes to employee education, they have to know what a phishing email looks like. They have to recognize those new methods, because now we have quishing, which is a ridiculous name, but it's a QR phishing, and then smishing, which is even more ridiculous name, but that's a link that's coming through a text for you to and they use this to impersonate their CEO, their CFO, their coworker, and they ask them to do things. And you need to be able to recognize that this is thing. I think you have to look at emails like that with the idea that you need to confirm first. So no matter how official the email looks, like the QR code, SMS, whatever it is, it could be as simple with the training is you're going to call that coworker or that CFO and say, did you send this to me? No, I didn't. Delete. And that's how you can stop those. They also have their vendors. Sometimes you'll get a thing, you're using UPS. Many businesses use UPS and Purelator and all these. And I've seen more emails coming through, hey, we need you to log in here because there's an issue with your shipment. So you need to be able to verify that. Were you even waiting for a package? And if so, can you get another solid confirmation that it's actually from UPS? You need
Yeah.
to be able to
And
recognize that email.
not only recognizing, but maybe taking an extra step and realizing that they can access the Perlator or UPS from a link that they already know instead of using the one that's in the email.
Go right
Right?
to ups.com
Exactly.
and log
Yeah.
in and then see what's happening.
Yeah.
Another thing is simply being able to recognize a user's language and especially odd requests and helping people recognize to have that the light go off. Like Tim doesn't normally request gift cards for the
Right.
employees, and he doesn't. And Sarah doesn't talk like this normally. It's coming from Sarah, or it appears to be, but the language just isn't right.
Right.
So the employee education is really important. And lastly, we want to train people to contact their managed IT services company or security provider if they're unsure.
Yeah.
So we help them determine.
That's the way it has to be.
Yeah.
And shout out to our clients that are already really good at doing that. You guys are great. You protect us all.
That's right.
Yes. Humans being humans. Let's review some of the mistakes that these employees make.
But even just building off the last point, right? Clicking without contemplating. You see it, it comes in, it says, click this, run it, it's great, and you just do it. You just got to take 10 seconds to sit back and say, what is the goal of this email? Who do I think is emailing me? What would they want this? Why would they want that? And am I 100% confident in clicking it? There's no scenario in business, I like to think, that you need to click on that email right now or you've lost money and time or productivity or whatever. It's worth it to just think about it and be sure about it. And then if you're not, send it to us and we'll tell you.
Yeah. Another thing they do is
more.
Another thing they do is sharing passwords. I've seen where they have one account for 10 different computers. They all have the same password. And then just for the sake of it, someone leaves the company. They still have that password. They still haven't changed it. That's someone that knows that password and that login without, they don't even work for you anymore. You need to have your own specific password.
Yeah. We've also seen sharing passwords where they say, I'm sick for the day or I'm going away on vacation. John, can you log in for me and do some of my work? Check my account. And often that's shared through email or through a post-it note, right? Text message, things that can be scraped and found by hackers. The one thing that I find difficult for people to wrap their heads around is trusting a name on an email. And the problem with email is you can pretend to be anybody. The name that appears is just made up. It's just entered as text. It doesn't reflect where it's actually coming from. So if I want to be King Edward, I can make that my first and last name on the system. And every email I says is King Edward. And users don't necessarily know how to find out what the address is that it's coming from. So it might say King Edward, you guys might be looking from an email from me, King Edward, but you didn't look at the address and it's actually from a hotmail.com or from a Gmail or from something else entirely.
Yeah, some
really
randomly generated email. It's not even, it doesn't look like a person's email.
It's AOL.com.
So when you see Sandra's in HR and you see her name in an email, it's important to train people on how to look to see if it's actually coming from Sandra. And if it is, then making sure that it's her language and the requests aren't odd, because Sandra's account could have been hacked and they're actually sending it from Sandra's account.
Yep.
So we're going to reinforce what these employees are learning, right? We're going to do regular training, follow up, keep them up to date with the newest tactics. Managed service providers are hopefully going to use understandable technology. We understand this is not their primary business. They might be in HR or finance or on the floor of a manufacturing facility. They're not IT people. So we have to make sure it's understandable for them, but we're also going to make sure that we're providing real life examples during these training sessions, because that's really what's going to hit home. Do you guys have any case stories where employee training helped avoid or mitigate a ransom attack?
Yeah, we've seen it in Fort Erie at a school. And this is interesting because you can anyone with a website that has an employee directory, for example, and I find people are starting to do that less, you can go on there and pick up their name and their role, right? So you go on there, you pick up that you're looking for Charlie, who's an accountant. Great. I got to attack him. So we saw that come through to this school, and they guessed or retrieved their email in some form, and then they emailed them and said, hey, I need to change my banking information. They specifically targeted the person they assumed that had money and or could control the money or the finances, and went to them and said, hey, I need to change where my pay goes to. Can you please complete this and start depositing funds elsewhere? And the finance person in this case recognized that this doesn't seem right. It was a very quick message. It had a strange introduction and a strange signature. The person said salutations, which most people don't.
They don't use that language.
Yeah, most people don't use that language. So
Greetings.
They identified, or good day, or with guards. Like they identified that this was not the right person. So they sent it to us, and they didn't act on it. And then we were able to confirm, okay, this did not come from the institution email address. This is just a semi-clever attempt, and just used with information found online. And that's what we reinforce as well. Like you're not hacked. They're just being not super lazy. They're taking 5 minutes to go online and look things up. So for them to still identify it was great.
Right. So a site like LinkedIn is very easy to use to find out who the CFO of any company is, or
easy peasy.
CIO is.
Yeah. It's so open. Yeah. Yeah. And then that almost is a case for saying, hey, maybe you reduce your presence online with certain attributes like that, but that's a different discussion.
Yeah. And tougher to do, especially with LinkedIn.
But sure, LinkedIn's a bad example, but putting your whole staff directory on for a school and saying, hey, this is every single person we have.
Yeah. That construction company in Niagara Falls who had the shipping personnel receive an email about the delayed shipments from a carrier they use. So instead of accepting the name on the email, which let's just say was Perlator, which had a logo in the message and it looked rather legitimate, and it had links saying, click here to reschedule this delivery, for instance, but they didn't just accept it at face value. Because of the training, they were able to recognize it says Perlator, but the address is not from perlator.com, right? And also they were able to confirm that the link didn't actually go to perlator.com either. But that all takes training.
Yeah, I remember that one actually, and it was good. It was really good.
It was really good. It looked just like
They sent it to us, and I had looked at it for a little while, and I was like, man, like, if you didn't have some kind of training or experience, like I would understand if you fell for it. Like it was that good in that case. They really did a good job. So good on that staff for catching it.
Absolutely. We've said a lot today. There's a lot to take in. If we can have a short recap of what we learned, let's just reiterate. Ransomware is affecting everyone, but now it's mostly affecting companies and also affecting the people that work for them and the vendors that they have and the clients that they have. So a ransomware attack isn't just attacking that business, it's attacking the people in the business and people attached to the business. And so on. This type of hacking, this ransomware it's easy to spread. It's easy to make money, untraceable money. It's easy to hide from law enforcement. So it's lucrative. They're building scam businesses and using corporate structures to achieve their goals. They're not a loose base of hackers. This is a real business that makes tens of millions of dollars. So I'd like to just reiterate that to you. There are things that you can do to hold yourself back from this wave of attacks, right? Now that you understand it a bit more, you understand that phishing email is 90% or more of the attacks come in through there. You can have someone help you do a risk assessment, identifying your weak links. Hopefully you've got some idea of where to start, even without that risk assessment, maybe doing some awareness training, putting in some basic protections, antivirus, email filters, backups, contacting a managed service company like CSN Tech Center, because we're going to be able to help you. You could do that real quick. And These organized groups are targeting these small and medium-sized businesses. And since it's less likely that you have the tools to defend against their attacks, you're a prime target. They're
For
not
sure.
interested in anything but your money. And these ransom demands, even though they're geared towards their targets, they're not asking millions of dollars from small businesses, but they may ask multiple tens of thousands of dollars. They're going to find out what your business earns, who your clients are, how much money that you might be able to be willing to pay. And these demands are growing exponentially. If you're unsure if your IT infrastructure has the right protections, get some help from a local managed IT services in Niagara, like CSN Tech Center, to implement these ransomware protection immediately. Companies like us and other ones, they can quickly provide a set of tools to bolster your defenses. Ransomware risk assessments are great, but they can be completed after you have some at least standardized protections in place. If you feel your IT infrastructure is secure already, have a third party confirm you're safe and call a company like CSN Tech Center, who will assist you with one of those ransomware risk assessments in the Niagara region.
Absolutely.
They're going to help you confirm that you are compliant for your industry and maybe for your insurer, because they're going to want to verify that you're as secure as you say you are in your documentation, but also discover the gaps that are in your security. I'd like to thank you for tuning in. I mentioned before at the beginning that you too can get free cybersecurity training. In order to do that, go to our site, mytechcenter.ca. I'll put the link in the video and in the description. You might be asking why we're giving this away. We do this for the benefit of the business community at large. If we band together to stop these hackers from making money and stealing less of our personal information, we're all safer for it. So I'd like to just say, feel free to call us. Our number is 905-871-8324. You can email us, help@mytechcenter.ca, for more information about ransomware protection in the Niagara region. We cover Niagara Falls and St. Catharines, Welland, Fort Erie, and the other surrounding towns. Thank you for listening in today, and we hope to hear from you. And take care. Stay safe.